Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live webinar, What If I Don't Match? My name is Sheila Aula, and I am the Vice President of Education and Placement here at Residence Medical. We want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I know some of you may be joining in from different parts of the globe, and it may be different times, so thank you so much for joining in. I wanted to take the time to introduce our panelists this evening. We have three amazing guests who are going to be joining us to share their knowledge with all of you. Our first guest, Professor Greg Heffernan, is the Vice President of Academic Affairs here at Residence Medical. He has over 25 years of experience as an educator, instructor, and a wealth of other journalism author and college professor. So he is going to be joining us and kind of leading this webinar. And we also have Dr. Castillo, who is joining us, who is a distinct family medicine specialist who has over 30 years of experience in the medicine field. And he is a current program director for a family medicine program here in California. And finally, we have one of our past candidates, Dr. Onu Amadi, who was a post-match placement candidate last year, who is a current resident in internal medicine in the Michigan state, who will be sharing his journey with you all this evening. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Heffernan and also remind you all that we will be answering your questions live during the webinar. So please make sure to input them into the chat or question and A part of the webinar link below. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila. Welcome everyone to our webinar, What Do I Do If I Don't Match? And we're going to get to some interesting statistics here this evening. Just for a little background information, about 48,000 people participated in the match in 2021. And of that number, 78% matched in. Now that includes US grads, DO grads, IMGs and FMGs. If you take out about 5,000 of those who did not do a rank list or withdrew, the number actually goes up. So there are, for example, 1,400 US grads who didn't match in 2021. And if you add to that those who withdrew, it's another 500. And then you're at almost 2,000 who didn't match. For the US grads who did not match in the previous match, you have another 800 of that. You've got the DOs that are about 774 that didn't match in 2021. And then the total IMG and IMG citizens of United States and IMGs that are foreign medical doctors, of that group, almost 10,000 did not match out of the total 18,000 that apply. So the total group of IMGs, and we get a lot of IMGs that I know are listening in, that did match in was about 7,000 in 2021. And that is a pretty much a constant number, about 7,000 up or down 100. We'll be talking a little bit about the US grads as well a little bit later in this webinar. And what is interesting, I was looking at the numbers, about 92% of the US grads match in every year. In 1992, that was the number, about 92%. So that number hasn't changed. What has changed are the DOs. And we have about 4,000 more DO applicants in last year's 2021 match than in 2017. So their numbers are going up, and their numbers are steadily going up in terms of matching. Now, again, they used to have their own separate match, so that will also have some effect on that. But the DO number is certainly rising. And the just for the last point I'll make, the foreign medical or IMGs that are non-US citizens, they actually matched more this last 2021, whereas the IMG's US citizens actually dropped a little bit. But there were a lot of different factors, may have been COVID, visa issues we would think would make them go down, but we'll discuss that a little bit more later. In the meantime, I want to welcome Dr. Amadi and Dr. Castillo. You guys have a wealth of information that I'm really interested to talk to you both about. So maybe we could start with you, Dr. Castillo. Tell me, I know you get a lot of student applicants. You've been a program director for years, run a very good primary care residencies. What would be your advice if somebody doesn't match in terms of your own experience?
Okay, I would assume that the question pertains to residents who complete the processes of application and get interviewed. Okay, so they complete the whole process, get interviewed, and didn't match. Okay, so of course, by the second week of March, they would know. And the first thing I would like them to really do is to distress, so that they can start processing and reflecting back on what happened. Looking back, they get interviewed and still didn't get matched, because once you get interviewed, the chances are higher of being matched. So reflect back, look at the application. I would like you to understand that you get an interview because there are something on your application that called the attention of the program director. So look back, what happened during the interview, what were asked, and what was your response. All right. And if you got to that stage of being interviewed, that's actually great, because it's almost like you are a flesh out individual rather than an application. When you get interviewed, it's not about the application anymore. It's about you presenting yourself as a potential candidate for the program. So a lot of reflection. Most of the time I observe, they get interviewed and they didn't do well in the response for the questions being asked. They're not coherent, inconsistencies on trying to give life to the application. Some are not very engaging, and sometimes when I look at the application, I'm looking at, is this truly the person who wrote this application? And those things you have to reflect back. The other thing I notice is sometimes you invite someone to interview, not because of high grades, because there's something in their application that really kind of like, I really like to see these applicants to really see how he does in a face-to-face, like a personal interview. And sometimes it doesn't justify what was written, or something that it doesn't match. And those things, so many different factors. That's why I would really suggest to, if you got to a point of being interviewed and didn't get matched, you really have to do a lot of reflection. And then it's not the end of the world. Don't let that bad experience derail you. Make use of it as a learning experience where you can improve your application or your interviewing skills. Because you know what, once you reach the interview process, that's a great opportunity to grab it. It is. Interviews are not offered to everyone. It's hard to get an interview, but once you get it and still not able to do it, there's something wrong.
We're under that impression as well. Any interview is actually a good interview because it does help you in the process to eventually get in.
Right.
And if you're, as you're saying, if you're bluntly honest with yourself, what went right, what maybe didn't go right, was I properly prepared? How did I respond? You can learn a lot from an interview, and it really, I've seen candidates over the years by interviewing with a particular program. And it's not necessarily a lot of interviews, but specific ones where they really learn something from that interview, help them eventually to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Amadi, I wanted to ask you, you've had some experiences applying in the residency program, match program, more than once, and you eventually got into residency. What would be your advice maybe to a candidate who has, maybe they got one interview, maybe not too many, they don't match in? What would you say to them?
I think Dr. Castillo was correct about reviewing your interview day. I would think, for me, I would pay attention to exactly everyone you talk to. Like, I remember for like my first interview, sometimes people are so psyched out talking to the program director, program people interviewing, they don't recognize the other people who are involved in the part of the day for their interview. When I take a chance to reflect, I think that's important. Everyone you interact with, how do you interact with them? Because pretty much the entire day, entire session is pretty much being evaluation. Even when I was for my last round interviews for this program I matched into, we were put in break rooms where we talked with the program coordinator. And again, having a conversation with them kind of actually mattered. Like people, if you're constantly knowing exactly you're being watched and being able to talk to communicate, is pretty much going to be to your benefit. Those interview skills we were talking about, how you interact, not just the program director, but everyone else, because you're constantly being evaluated for this particular time. So you want to make sure that everyone that sees you that day, that you leave a good impression and you're able to leave something memorable to them. So I kind of almost like with a blind date, you want to make sure that, hey, there's something about this person that I really like about the person that I want to keep learn back or come back for more. That's my best advice for people who've gotten interviews and not crossed over, because again, that's the key thing, is everyone that you're talking to, remembering exactly everything you have to say.
Okay, can I add to what Dr. Amadi said? He hit it right on target, okay? Applicants behave differently when they're talking to program director. They're gonna set the best face and the best foot. What they don't understand is it's a committee deciding. The program director has a lot of guidance and input on the decision what residents will be accepted for ranking. But the residents are being interviewed by different people, faculty, coordinator, residents themselves, and they meet after interview during ranking. They will describe the experience that they had. You know, when, for example, I don't know if they're still doing it now because of the COVID. During the usual interview processes, they have dinners just with the residents alone, and the behaviors are different. When they are with the residents alone, they feel more engaged. They are on a very comfortable scenario where they're talking to the other residents. They become, they are different when they're on one-to-one versus a group interview. So there's so many dynamics that can be observed by other interviewers. And most of the time when the committee convene, they will give their input on their experience during their interview, their individual interview or a group interview. Those are considered during the ranking, because residents behave differently in different scenarios. We want consistency. If you're engaging, friendly, you have to be friendly and engaging all throughout. And if you are not as friendly as your personality might be, try to engage. Engaging is very important, because most of the time, I'll give you my experience on interview. When I interview someone or observe someone be interviewed, I always imagine this resident, this is how he looks like when he talks to a patient. Okay, will the patient able to connect to this applicant? Those kind of things I have in mind and behind my mind while observing and interviewing at the same time. Remember, you're going to be most of your 3 years training will be about your connection to the patient and your relationship with them. So that's what I usually look at. How do they engage? How do they connect? Do they use the right word? Do they have mannerisms? Do they have the nonverbals that are very helpful for them to be able to really come across and connect with different types of people, especially the patients, other faculty, the consultants, the nurses. Those kind of dynamics are very important, so that if this is something that you reflect on that became a problem during your interview, you have to improve on it though. You have to be reflective. The other thing I noticed is I have interviewed people or applicants who had failing grades. As you know, one of the most important decision that program director is the grade. If your USMLE score is not as good and still given a chance for interview, don't be defensive. I don't want to, I usually kind of like hear, because my parents died, or that's why my wife was sick and got operated on. Those are signs of defensiveness. You know, if you don't fail because you're not ready, just say so. You're not ready. You didn't prepare, rather than giving reasons for the failure. That is more acceptable. That is more reasonable for a program director, rather than being given the feeling that this candidate is very defensive, and that doesn't help.
So honesty is always the best policy, is what you're saying
Yes.
there too. So,
Be yourself.
yeah. Now, I know, Dr. Amadi, you matched in during COVID. And the reason I bring that up is most of the interviews during COVID, I think 95% of them were virtuals. And that created different challenges. Yeah, just to, once you got an interview. Can you share with me a little bit about that in terms of the virtuals? And I'm also going to ask you about that, Dr. Castillo, too, because we've talked to many program directors across the country after doing interviews all virtually, and they were wondering, God, what did we rank the right people? We didn't get to meet them in person, all that sort of thing. But it was a unique challenge. And a lot of times, too, some of the residents that are candidates aren't always aware that the other residents in the program, just as you mentioned, are also going to be interviewing you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also part of that committee. But Dr. Amadi, why don't you share with us a little bit about your experience in that area?
So I think matching during COVID was an initial challenge. It has some pluses and minuses. I think one of the pluses for me was there was different phases of the interview process that happened. So everything didn't happen at once. So I remember earlier, I was able to meet with the program coordinator and talk to her for like 15, 20 minutes about my application and profile and my willingness to go to the program. And a couple of weeks later, I was able to sit down with the with our program coordinator and assistant program coordinator, program director and our assistant program director, and have an initial in-depth conversation about my application. So even though they had my entire application in front of me prior to meet with the program coordinator, we're able to go in a lot more detail. And then especially with the program coordinator and my assistant program coordinator going over exactly why I would be a good candidate to the program. I think initially when you get selected, again, as Dr. Castillo says, there's something about your application or things about application that's being highlighted to the program director. And now they're trying to vet to see exactly what, if you're going to be a candidate for the program, not their program. I got a lot more detailed questions coming from my program coordinator based on exactly the amplitudes, again, test scores, your willingness to work as a resident, additional research projects I worked on. So I can tell that he actually looked at my application, but not only that, but actually looked into the research projects I've been doing over the past couple of years and actually in-depth questions. So again, he actually reviewed my application the night before, and I was able to say, okay, I had to verify exactly everything was there. With my assistant program coordinator, I can tell that, again, her objective was, would I be a good fit to not just the rest of the program, but a community I'm serving, and exactly what is your ethos of what you plan on doing. So it's actually more of an in-depth conversation, talking to somebody exactly what your passions are and what you want to bring to there. So it was two different styles of interview, two different styles of interview on the same day. One that was going through everything that my entire medical record up to date, and the other one exactly why they want to be there. So I believe it was kind of easier in the virtual setting because I can just talk to them vice versa. And my goal was to make sure that you could actually feel me across the screens. And yes, it's easier when you see someone face to face, but at the same time, can you make that person remember you when you hit the exit button or you leave the screen? And I kind of felt like that was my main goal there. But also my interaction program coordinator, I made sure to feel welcoming, and I made sure that, hey, they actually were engaged to come see me, come talk to me. So I think most people kind of forget that part. It's a milestone just to get to this moment, but you want to make sure that everyone is actually helping you or preparing application that moment, that you're making sure that, hey, you really want to talk to this person, you really want to see this person. The more people that are vetting for you, it kind of makes it an easier outcome towards the end. And I think those are some of the things that kind of helped me close this process.
That's a very interesting response. So you had one interviewer, how are you a good fit, which is a way we often will set up when we do interview prep too, is how are you a good fit? But you had another interviewer who basically went through your material and very meticulously and took the time to look at it so that you had to fully explain it. Very interesting kind of dichotomy there in terms of interviewers. Dr. Castillo, you were going to add to that?
Yes, your question is how does the new, processes of interview like like Zoom versus face-to-face. Well, there are several feedbacks that we got from different directors, and they're positive because in reality, this is going to be the future now. In so many ways, to get interview, the previous the usual processes in the past, the traditional one where you get invited, you have to travel, rent a hotel, fly. Those are very expensive. Now we're starting to realize that there are really no difference between the interaction face-to-face versus a webinar or a webinar, or the Zoom. You are interviewing the same person, but because it's a tradition, has been a tradition for a long while to have a face-to-face interview. But what I heard from a majority of the feedback is there's no much difference other than there's no actual the feeling of the touch and all those real-time interaction with the program, or seeing the program or looking at the program facility or the touring of the program. But in general, it looks like it's going to be more a type of a process that's going to be adopted by most of the program nowadays.
Yeah, well, it's, you mentioned what would this candidate be like with a patient? So now with the new technology, is that what goes on in the back of your mind? How would this candidate be telemedicine connected to a patient? In other words, how are their virtual talents as well? Because that obviously is a very important part of patient care now that's coming up, and it's going to be a requirement, as you can imagine. Too.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yes.
Actually, the ACGME guidelines has included telemedicine as one of the areas where residents should be trained. In the future, the revision of the ACGME requirements include telemedicine. It's an activity or a process where the residents will be able to utilize the system not only for interview but for actual patient care. For patient care, it's becoming widely accepted by every institution and most clinics. And I'm predicting, this is one of the predictions in the future, that technologies such as this will be highly utilized because there's a lot of benefit in so many ways: the travel time, the access, the availability, those things, especially for certain patients not able to travel, or there are no available transportations, and those who would like to access their doctors readily, those are something that we're looking at in the future. So I would say that this is going to be a part of our training now, residency training. This is now well accepted and will be utilized in greater and in more program nowadays. They're going to start using this more and more.
Dr. Amadi, you seen that already in the residency program you're in?
Yes. So I believe with COVID, I think my class is the first class to have telemedicine integrated to our clinic practice, and like our hours are being tracked on how many patients we see and how much time we're spending with telehealth patients. So it's something that we're being evaluated on now as first years compared to our third year graduating class members. Even though they did it, it wasn't a requirement for them. I'm also seeing a lot of specialists in internal medicine, i.e. like GI for specifically, they're seeing their patients telehealth for their follow-up visits versus having to come in office, i.e. to decrease exposure to COVID-19 virus, but also allows them to be more efficient with their day and spend more time doing procedures in the hospital. So I'm kind of seeing the transition to including telehealth medicine, especially in the world of internal medicine, in primary care, internal medicine practice, but also in the specialties as well.
And I think you're correct there, Dr. Castillo.
Yes, that's the reality of the landscape of medicine. Technologies are available. you have to use it in a way that your delivery of care will become efficient and very accessible.
Yeah. For those who are listening in, based on our topic, what do I do if I don't match? So, yeah, it's great if you get the interview, but if you haven't gotten the interview, and as I said, just looking at the NRMP results this last 2021, there were 5,000 applicants who either withdraw or had no rank list. And it's even more if you add the total up. There's about, if you add that to the unmatched. So the unmatched got maybe some interviews, and those with withdraw or no rank list, and that number alone was 5,000. They just got no interviews. How do they get those interviews? How do they work that back in? Because that if you don't match, there's various reasons, and you may not have even had a chance to match if you're one of those 5,000 last year. Any ideas or suggestions that you would put forward, Dr. Amadi?
That's one of the challenges that I had to face before I started working residency medicals. Exactly. Again, I was one of those people that went through the process and didn't get any interviews. So I had to figure out exactly what went wrong and what I need to do moving forward. So again, I took some time. I took a month in order to reflect, but also I would print out my application and go through box by box to figure out exactly what went wrong in every single box moving forward. And I think working with Sheila and working with residency medical especially, our objective was to kind of not just fill every box, but make sure every box was meaningful moving forward. Once I figured out how to properly put in information that was going to make my application a lot stronger, I was able to see myself become a much more desirable candidate to a program director. Because again, you want to make sure they're going to, if someone looks at this application for a couple minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, they're able to see this is a candidate I actually want to see. The more dead space or space that's not filled out, it's going to work against you. But if you're able to not just put something there, but something there is going strong, something that they're going to want to see, it kind of definitely helped me out. So even though I did research in the past, I was involved with other research processes with residency medical. And that was a strong point of what the program director was asking me during my interview days, making sure that I completed my step 1, step 2, step 3 process definitely helped me out as well. But also the next question was, how is this going to prepare you for the boards, and what's your plan for that? So especially when we're talking about students with failures, I apologize. What is your plan moving forward? So even though we kind of don't want to highlight our mistakes or negative errors, you want to have to prove exactly what's going to be what your plan is moving forward. And with test prep, things like that, always made sure when I had an interview ask me something I thought was a negative question, I highlighted 3 points to make it a positive question. So there's no way I left a negative taste invitation in the interviewer's mouth. Like, okay, this is someone that's proving that he's unable to do the work, versus, you know what, this guy has a plan. He actually understands. He has made mistakes, but more importantly, he just wants to keep moving forward. So I can feel I can gain their trust, and hopefully that guy will be someone I can lean on, versus I don't know about that person. I think that definitely helped me out.
I agree with Dr. Mali. Let's say you didn't get matched, this cycle. Of course, you're going to have to apply next year for the next cycle. Continue to do clinically relevant activities that demonstrate that you have embraced the lifelong learning, the concept, the culture of lifelong learning. That's very important. Gaps. We look at gaps. We want to make sure that that you are continually doing something that is clinically relevant to keep you abreast, like evidence-based medicine. Research is one of those. Anything that might prove that you are keeping yourself abreast and not totally lost in the field of medicine. And it's hard. Also look at, sometimes I would like the applicant to be realistic. Look at all the backgrounds and everything else. How long did I graduate? How long ago did I graduate? How many years ago? Okay, if I failed 5 times, 3 times, you have to be realistic. You have to have other plans. You have to have other plans, not just completely relying on luck alone. Although luck is very important. I have seen a lot of luck, but how many are those who have the opportunity to have luck? You know, what I'm saying is, do the best you can. I know the social media nowadays, even YouTube or everywhere else, there's so many tips that are, you know, being shown in YouTube, or because there's a need. There are thousands of applicants within match, and there are a lot of videos that you can find, or even help or tips from forums, from IMGs, or of group forums. Sometimes it gets confusing, but there are things that you can actually derive from those that are useful. Look at the applicability of what they're suggesting to your scenario. If you feel that you really know, you have to know it yourself, that my application is, the chances of me being having to get an interview is very remote, or it's almost impossibility. You know, you can tell it every time you apply, you don't get an interview unless there's a way you improve your applications, something that might catch the attention of the program director, you know. And the most important thing really is to get that interview. And once you get the interview, it actually transform the CVs, the scores, into something fleshed out, you know, something that something that you can prove during the interview. You become a reality. It's not about your application anymore, it becomes you. So first thing first, strengthen your application whatever way. You can do activities that strengthen it, like, you know, you may do research, although research is not really as everybody might think. That's one of the most they're important, but those are not the reason why you will not match or you get matched. Those are important things that you do those things, but continually keeping yourself abreast. Those are important post unmatched, you know, experience. And well, and then realistically look at your background, look at, you know, everything else, so you can plan ahead. You know, you don't want to have false hope that you spend so much money trying to apply, and then suddenly you totally neglected looking at other opportunities that could have been looked at, you know, instead
Which
of like,
could inadvertently even maybe lead to residency later on. I've seen that happen as well. Over the years, some of the older graduates that we've counseled too have turned out to be some of the best residents in the program. But one of the things that they did is just what you mentioned, is they continued that lifelong learning, and they stayed active, and they saw that there's a value of what they were doing, even if they didn't match in that year, whatever they were working on, that they continued on that focus, and also to see where or what specialty they would be the best gift for. That sometimes is a reality, as you well know. If somebody just doesn't have the scores to apply for certain specialties that are just so competitive for both US grads and IMGs, that will oftentimes create a problem for matching in. The statistics last year, about 3,000 of the IMGs, they went into internal medicine. Another about 1,200 go into primary care. Another 500 go into pediatrics. But it's, there's not a lot in some of the other specialties that are very competitive.
right.
I'm going to start with some questions here in a minute. If you don't mind, I'd like to read a few of them. For example, one of the questions is, what do you do if you don't match in the specialty that you want? And this kind of leads to what I just said. What would you recommend if there's a specialty that you're not matching into? Should you reconsider? Should you be dead honest about that? Go ahead, Dr. Castillo.
Okay. With that, you really have to be realistic. There are certain specialties that are IMG friendly, and you can, when you look at the match every year, it's published, the result of match every year. If you have time to look over it, kind of like do your own analysis, which specialty are more friendly to IMGs. Certain specialties are IMG friendly. You cannot be applying for dermatology or radiology unless you have a very stellar score of 240, 250 scores in USMLE. So your choice will be more realistic. I understand that the IMGs have more struggles and difficult time compared to US graduate. What they have to go through is nothing compared to what the US graduate has to go through. And most of the program directors understand that. And I have seen a lot of IMGs that perform better than US graduate. But how would the program director know that? They wouldn't know that. So there are agencies that might be able to help those residents to kind of like be discovered. You know, some agencies place them on certain experience like research or rotation of observership, especially in the East Coast, like Florida is very friendly. New York is very friendly. California is not as friendly in IMGs, but there are, New Jersey is very friendly. California is not very friendly with family medicine. Most of the family medicine here but are mostly US graduate, unless you are placed in rural areas. But analyze the results of the match every year, and kind of like draw something out of the information you get from the results. That helps you also to guide. It also guides you on how can I make a decision which specialty I'm going to be applying. Be realistic. You might want to be a surgeon, but realistically, can you be accepted? I understand that some have to apply different specialties, but during the interview, some program director are looking at a specialty specific or certain passion to certain discipline. Like, do they truly want to be a family doc, or do they truly want to become an internist? Sometimes, if you're honest that you wanted to be you wanted to get into the system, whether it's primary care, but as long as you're able to demonstrate the passion, that you'll do well, even if you are applying for multiple positions, because most of the program directors are looking for someone who are more consistent. Did you apply only for family medicine? And then some of them apply for pediatrics and internal medicine. And I understand that. You know what? If you're able to get in the system, that's well and good. But the program director is looking for someone who's going to truly like the specialty they're applying for, so that they will be happier. They will be having less burnout because they decided to go to a specialty that they truly like.
Right. Dr. Amadi, would you like to add to that?
I think for me, I kind of wanted to focus on exactly what I wanted to do. Like early in my process, I was applying to multiple specialties, just trying to get my foot in the door, and I wasn't very successful. And one of the things that I kind of settled down on, not just get into residency, but how to become a better internist. I kind of want to devote my energy into do that. So I kind of, when I was able to focus on not just trying to get into any door, but how to get a specific door, and how do I make myself, people know this is what I want to do. Once I settled that question down, it came a lot easier to focus my CV to be like, okay, why would this guy be a great internist? And if that was one of my leaving points, I want to make sure that if anyone read my application, anyone read my personal statement, anyone read anything about my application, that was the selling point. I think that's the key thing. If you're kind of focused on like, how do I get open to multiple doors, you might be able to land an interview, you might be able to open one door, but the doors you want to go into, you might not fail that. You might be able to get in that. If your objective is, I want to go into surgery, then you want to put your all into like how to become the best surgical resident, how to become the best, and do exactly those things need to be done. So if that's additional research, that's additional scut work, if that's additional shadowing, making sure you talk to other surgeons and see how you can do, that's the things you want to do. You just don't want to do things in pediatrics and family medicine when the goal is getting a surgery. For me, I knew I would go into internal medicine, but not only that, primary care. So I made sure that those were the experiences that I was highlighting into, especially during the COVID pandemic, make sure, hey, this is the area that I want to go to. This is the one to do. So it's kind of easier for my program directors and the people seeing me afterwards, like, you know what, this guy will make a good fit here because he knows exactly what the job entails and he's actually doing it. versus just trying to get the foot in the door or being something that you're not. Because again, authenticity kind of matters. You might be able to get away with that with program directors, but typically when the role gets shifted to the chief residents or other residents in the program, they can kind of flush out and give the make or break opinion on an application. I kind of wish I kind of talked about a little bit more, but I think that's the key thing. You want to make sure everyone that sees you knows exactly why you're here, and you're able to convince everyone is in the program. It's like a big family. They all have your back versus trying to fight different family members against your application. I think that's probably the best advice I can give.
Very good. I highly agree on that. Romeo, did you want to add anything on?
Yeah,
on
if you look at the data from last year, the 2021 March, the most unfilled positions are internal medicine and family medicine. And if primary care is truly what your passion, all about, then I agree with Dr. Amadi that you have to focus, because some program director can sense that. They prepare someone who truly have a passion, a certain specialty, and truly love the specialty and become the best they can on that discipline. There are also states that are friendlier for internal medicine and family medicine. So if because there are different types of primary care. Pediatrics is a primary care, internal medicine is a primary care, family medicine is a primary care, but wide array of learning. So look at your heart. What do you truly like? Don't apply on something that kind of like unrealistic that you're not going to be matched. Look for a specialty or state that the likelihood of being matched is higher. Even if you didn't match, look at where did you apply, okay, and then look at what is the content of your application, and look at what happened during the interview. Why did I get an interview and still didn't get matched? Those things, those elements, put them all together, that might give you higher chances of being matched next time around.
We've seen a number of candidates sometimes are just interviewed not very well, to be kind. And because you may look at the application and say, hey, this person, had a decent chance, but being able to show how you're a good fit and how you connect and how you're authentic in your pursuit and focus, as Dr. Amadi is saying, does come across in an interview. And if it doesn't, where we've seen in some applicants, that can add to their, not matching. So there is a dynamic there that really involves doing your homework where you're interviewing, learning about that program, and also knowing what your real gifts and talents are and what you really want to do. So, and I think if you have all of that working together, as Dr. Amadi said too, you have everybody at your back and they say, this person is authentic, they've got a plan, even if they've got an attempt here or there, they even know how to rectify that. They're studying for, let's say, the in-training exam, and they're very conscientious. If I was a program director, I would appreciate that, because they're telling me they care enough about my program. They've done their homework, they're working on it. That's somebody that I would love to have around for 2 or 3 years, as you say. There was a question that came in. Do you feel that adding research to the CV can help if you're not matching?
Okay, research is a very important skill to know, but this is not the reason why you're going to get matched or not matched. Research is an important component of training, but it's not. It depends on where you're applying. If you're applying in a academic settings where research is very heavy and you have a lot of research, that's a good thing for the program. For them to for the applicants to consider those type of training program. If you're applying in a rural setting, they don't really require a lot of research. Just the understanding of research. We don't really give that much weight, but because we understand, most program director understands that while waiting for the opportunity to get matched, applicants are looking for opportunities to be still relevant in the clinical field. So research is one of those that's always available. if you do a research that are so meaningful and really something that might transform the future, that's very relevant. That might be very helpful. But in general, research, it depends on where you're applying. It's important, but don't heavily rely, I mean, kind of like reliant on it though. It's a good thing that you have it on your experience.
Dr. Amadi, you're in the internal medicine specialty. There's a little more research based often in internal medicine because it's sort of a situation room of a hospital. But your thoughts on that?
To piggyback off Costin says, like for internal medicine, definitely there's a bigger research component, but I think the main thing you need to understand is to understand the research, as he was saying. That was a major component, especially in my interview day. It was not just the fact that you're able, just for most people looking at, can I produce papers? Can I put names on papers? Do you understand, which isn't the main goal, because again, medicine is a team process. Do you understand the process and what was your role and what you contributed into the role? The major thing. So that was the major thing, explaining to them exactly, not just how the paper, not just the end result, but how was the paper created and what were your actual roles in order to do so. Those are what's going to be a lot more meaningful, because again, they're going to teach you these skills when you get there. Even understanding that can definitely help you a long way. I think for me, understanding the entire research process definitely has helped out. But either way, I'm spending time in my first year going over the entire research process and making sure that I understand those skills. So just because you might not have research, don't feel like you're never going to learn these skills, understand those skills. They're going to be taught to you, but do you understand the process and be able to explain it to them? But the mainstay is, let's assume you don't have research in your application. That's definitely could be a selling point in your application, because you can now show to the program coordinator what are some things you want to do to figure things out. And again, I think that's the main thing you can try to focus in on. How do you make yourself a stronger candidate? And just understanding the process. You don't have to always look at it as, okay, I need to publish 10 papers, etc., because it takes time to do so. How to get involved in the process, how to understand the process, and how do I learn in order to make these traits more available to me as I continue my medical journey.
Can I add on that, Craig? If truly you are a research-driven person, apply on a program who offer a lot of research, like usually academic institution. The newer recommendation or guidelines from ACGME, you have to define what your program is. Are you a research heavy program, or are you more of a, there's a distinction for every program. So look at the mission of the program you're applying. What are they? And although the reason why we need the residents to understand research, they need to understand the process, how evidence base is being developed based on those research. How do you extrapolate from those research results and its application to your practice of medicine? Those are what we're looking for. Even there's tons of research. How do you apply this in your real life, in your actual practice of medicine? You don't have to publish thousands of research, hundreds or even numbers of research. We're not looking to that.
Yeah. I have talked to some program directors who actually have said they will put applicants in the top 5% if they do have significant research, but that is not every program.
Not every program.
It was not primary care too. So, it will vary. And as you said, you do a little homework about the program. If it's more academic and you really want to do research, that's going to be a better fit. They'll probably appreciate that, especially if you have research. Another question here, how, and maybe Dr. Amadi, you can help, how Residence Medical can help students match in. How can an organization with certain services be helpful to students who don't match or are trying to match in? Dr. Amadi?
I think for me, it's the understanding of the process. I think when you go in by yourself, sometimes you might know exactly every single avenue that's being asked of you or what certain questions that need to be done, i.e. test preparation, CV preparation, interview skills, being around the right type of observerships, but also contact with certain program directors. I think these are the things that definitely help me in residence medical, but also mentorship. I was being able with Residence Medical to actually talk to program directors to actually go through the process, see exactly what they want, and be able to ask them directly exactly how do I make myself a better candidate? What do I need to do fit? So I was able to pick up allies along the way, that when it came time to go into an interview session, when I needed people to vouch for me exactly what type of person I am when it came to being a physician, they could actually attest to my character. When it came to exactly understanding, again, I struggled with test taking when it came to step 1 and step 2. Residence Medical kind of put a plan on how to not just focus on step 3, but also, hey, how do you become a lifelong test taker? So when it comes to taking things like ITE, board preparation, it's not something you're scared and afraid of. So I'm able to be more conscious learner and studying not just for examinations, but as I go through every year in my residency program, I know, hey, I have a board exam every single year. I can't just wait till 2-3 weeks prior to studying for the examination. I'm studying now constantly throughout the year. That's definitely one thing. Interview skills, again, not just knowing how to interview, how to talk to people. First it was in live, but now through like a virtual format, we kind of practiced and went through exactly how do I make myself engaging? How do I make myself jump through the screen? Like, okay, even though I can't see the person, I want to talk to the person. So I was able to flush through things, how to make myself a better candidate. And that's one of a lot of the resources that Residence Medical has, is what these programs are looking for. So these are the things that you want to make sure that you're flushing out and making sure that you're not mastering. So when it comes to that chance that you have to get an interview, you excel at interview. And that's one of the key things with Sheila I love the most. Was like, we're going to get you the interview, but you're going to have to excel and make sure you bring it home.
All right. That sounds good, Dr. Castillo.
Yes, when we invite applicants for interview, we don't know them. We only know them by their application. That's where we base the interview from. But residents
Medical.
the agency actually has vetted all these applicants. They have firsthand experience with the residents, and they prep them in a way that they have so many elements that make them stronger candidates. They know program directors that might not even consider any of the applicants unless there's an attestation that this is truly a very excellent program. And on my experience, I consider those, because I'd rather get someone who has been tested, who's been vetted, who has been prepped or prepared in so many different ways for them to get ready for residence, rather than selecting from someone unknown and relying on the review of the applications and the interview. So you have so many elements that an agency can provide you. Make use of it, because that's their experience. They know where to put the residents. They know the right program director that might have the inclination to consider, or they know how to prep the residents to make them a stronger candidates for any interview. And in that way, the residents will be very confident by the time they get interviewed, and they will be able to really kind of like demonstrate things that program director might not see, unless someone of some agency with great experience in trying to make sure that the program director understand that these residents or these applicants are truly strong candidate that they're gonna do well in any residency program. Because one thing that program director hates is someone giving them headaches.
Yeah.
We don't want residents who just gonna be giving us headaches. We want someone who's more prepped and ready.
Thank you very much. We are about to close here, so I'm going to call Ms. Aula back, and I want to thank both of you for some extraordinary insights and very eloquent sharing. So Dr. Castillo and Dr. Amadi, Ms. Aula here. Why don't you take things away?
Hi, everyone. So just as we're closing and wrapping up, just wanted to let you know this is an open forum for, questions back and forth. So, if there are any last minute ones that you'd like to get in, please do so. But I wanted to, congratulate Dr. Amadi, because as he mentioned, I personally worked with him throughout his journey and time here at Residence Medical. And I saw you grow, and it really is a pleasure, and I'm so proud of you, and to hear you speak and talk today as an internal medicine resident, and to be so confident, it makes me so happy, and I just, it's an amazing feeling to be a part of your journey.
Thank you, and likewise. Thank you, and likewise.
So I think if there's not any other questions to pop up, then we are going to wrap up. Actually, I'm sorry, I see one just added here. So good evening. Quick background. I have a home country residency and clearing the boards now, aiming to apply to OB-GYN or surgery. Would working as a surgical assistant in a big hospital sound as a good clinical experience? Thank you for this and all informative webinars. Dr. Castillo, would you like to answer that question?
What I'm hearing is he is it a female applicant? Does he or she have a actual U.S. experience? Is the purpose of being a surgical assistant is to gain experience in the United States?
Yes, it seems like they want to work as an assistant in a hospital just to gain U.S. clinical experience.
You have to go back again to the basic concept that I was trying to explain earlier. Obstetric is truly your passion, or surgery is truly your passion. And if your credentials, they're very highly competitive specialties. If your USMLE score is high enough for them to consider, and you have a life story to tell and convince the program director to provide you an interview, the experience here as a surgical assistant might only help us much. Although I think most of the common concept of foreign graduates is, I want to understand the healthcare system in the United States and prove it to the program director that I do have understanding of the healthcare system. It does help in some ways, but they're looking at other qualifications that they have in their application. USMLE score is one of the greatest deciding factors. 70%. This is actually a naive, applicant who never had application sent before, right? So if look at his applications, what strengthened the application, and if he can give it a try, and then he will learn from the try. Luckily, if he get an interview, then he was able to demonstrate that passion on obstetrics or a surgical specialty.
Thank you, Dr.
I hope I answered her question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to let everyone know who's tuning in that you are welcome to come onto our website at residencemedical.com. We do have a live chat there. So in case you have any questions that you didn't get answered today, or you would like to continue talking about, you're more than welcome to come online. And we do offer free consultations over Zoom for any potential candidates. So myself or any of the other counselors in the office would be more than happy to speak with you about your particular profile and how we can assist you on your pathway to residency. And we do still have time for post-match possibly. So don't fret if you don't match, please give us a call. We can come up with a plan. And, just like Dr. Amadi post-match last year, you could be the next person. So I want to thank both Dr. Castillo and Dr. Amadi for joining us this evening and sharing their valuable time with everyone. And we're looking forward to match in just a couple of weeks. And I'll sign off. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you for allowing me to join.
Have a good evening to everyone.
Bye-bye. Good night.